Chapter 91 Alleyway. Ring. Ding. Dong. Just as Shun made the final save of the game, the sound of the bell chimed as well. And with the chime of the school bell, the game finally came to an end along with the lunch break. Hearing the chime of the bells, the students gathered in the field began to scatter around. They then started to head towards their classes. Some running, some walking. All of them started to head towards their respective classes. Chatter. Chatter. Man, that was an impressive game. Right. Especially that guy with the curly hair. Just how was he able to move like that? That goal he scored after dribbling past 3 defenders. It was a masterpiece. A masterpiece. Did you see his muscles underneath his shirt? His face was even more charming. Man, I'm jealous of him. I bet he can pull over any chick of his desire. Such over-exaggerating comments kept on circulating among the students as they made their way towards their classes after the end of the match. Let's go, Minami. Saying such, the short girl grabbed Minami's hand. While casting one final glance at Hiro, Minami nodded her head and replied, Let's go. And just as the players prepared to exit the field, Hiro walked towards Masao and spoke. Good game, Masao. We should play often. Thank you. Masao finally mustered up the courage to accept the compliment. Noticing Masao's smiling face, Masato looked at him coldly and mumbled under his breath. Every dog has its day, so enjoy your day while it lasts. Saying such, he blended in the crowd and vanished within the crowd. The game ended with Hiro's team's victory. They won the lunchtime game with a score of 2-0 against Shun's team. Heeding to the advice of the English teacher, Hiro pretended to pay attention to the rest of the classes after the lunchtime. And he somehow refrained himself from looking out of the window. Along with Ms. Yumi, who taught them science, and Mr. Haruki, who taught them history, one other teacher came and taught them maths after the lunch break. The classes then finally came to an end with the chime of the school bell. Fearing the incident from the lunch break, Hiro, who had packed his bag even before the end of the final class, rose from his seat and ran towards the door with his bag. Oi, Hiro, wait for me. Rin, who was seated in front of him, yelled while packing his bag. I can't. I'll just meet you tomorrow. Saying such, he exited the classroom in a hurry. Why did he leave so soon? Yeah, I wanted to add him on Facebook. The girls from his class cried out loud upon seeing him running out of the classroom. Without stopping, he ran towards the school gate and hopped on the yellow bus parked outside the main gate. It was the same bus from the morning. Now where should I sit? He mumbled while looking at the empty seats in front of him. Since he was the first to arrive at the bus, unlike in the morning, he could choose the seat of his choice. La 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 la. While passing through an alleyway, Masao, who was walking towards his home, all by himself in a pretty good mood, was humming a sweet melody. The sun was still shining, and with nobody around, he was the only person in that alleyway. Maybe I should continue playing football. Mumbling such, he continued to walk towards his home. But all of a sudden, he stopped his movement. With his pupils enlarged and heart beating faster, he looked in front of him, terrified. He then slowly retracted his step and began to run backwards. Catch him. He's running away. Masato, who was waiting for him at that particular alleyway, commanded his sidekicks to run after him after seeing him fleeing away. Noticing Masato and his gangs, Masao ran as fast as he could without looking back. But even so, he couldn't get away from their clutches. At the end of the alleyway, just at the intersection, Masato's other sidekicks were stationed at either side of the intersections waiting for his arrival. Upon hearing Masao's footsteps, those guys hidden behind the walls stepped outside and blocked his path. With Masato behind and 2 other guys in front, Masao was trapped. At his either side were massive walls. Having nowhere to run, Masao stopped and slowly walked towards the wall. Look, Masato, I haven't done anything wrong to you. So why do you always bully me like this? Please let me leave, Masato. Masao's voice shook as he began to beg Masato to let him leave with eyes full of tears. Hara, look at our Piggy crying out loud. Masato laughed while looking at him sobbing and begging. Why are you so afraid, Piggy? We won't harm you. Yeah, after watching you play football, we just wanted to play with you. Masato continued. Right, guys? Masato questioned his sidekicks. Hara, yeah, we just want to play some football with you. The other guys replied while laughing. While stomping his way towards Masao, Masato continued his yapping. But our Piggy here doesn't consider us as his friends. Haven't we been together since elementary school? So why are you leaving our group for that new guy now? Masato slowly approached Masao, who was sobbing while leaning himself against the wall in between the 2 groups. And as Masato approached closer to him, he began to lower his body. While covering his ears and closing his eyes, he cowered and shrunk his body into a shape of ball. Why are you closing your ears, Masao? Did you also cover your ears like this when Kia was screaming for help? Masato spoke while approaching him. No. His voice full of terror, Masao yelled. Did you also close your eyes when Kia got butchered to his death? Masato kept on teasing him. Or was it you who murdered Kia? Masato spoke in a serious tone. No, I didn't kill him. No, it wasn't me. No. Masao kept on screaming aloud with tears in his eyes. Chapter 92 Squad Selection. While cowering in guilt and fear, Masao kept on yelling helplessly. But still no amount of begging availed Masao. With tears rolling down his eyes like monsoon downpour, he begged Masato helplessly to stop traumatizing him. But Masato wasn't willing to listen to his plea. In fact, with a big nasty smile on his face, he was enjoying the sight of Masao cowering in horror. Where's your smile from before, Piggy? Now why don't you show me your teeth? Masato spoke contemptuously while laughing. Please stop it. Please, I beg you. His body shivering and his voice shaking, Masao, who was traumatized by the words of Masato, begged him to stop. While Masato made such comments, the other four sidekicks of Masato stood there laughing and enjoying the sight of Masao cowering helplessly. Yeah, Masao, did you close your ears and eyes back then as well? A lanky guy who was standing beside Masato commented while smiling. As if he was choked to death, Masao's body began to turn pale and he began to have difficulties in breathing. While sweating and gasping heavily, he screamed in his shrill voice. No, it's not my fault. His finally cry was so loud that even the people who resided at the end of the alleyway couldn't ignore it anymore. Noticing his screams, they then walked out of their houses to inspect the source of the noise. Masato, the people from the end of alleyway are coming. We need to leave now. The two guys who were keeping eyes on people at the end of alleyway mumbled while noticing some people making their way towards the commotion. Let's go, Masato. The guy beside him panicked. Consider yourself lucky, piggy. Masato spoke before running away. After that, all of them started to run away. They then crawled towards a hole in the far left wall and vanished from the scene. That hole, which was formed in the wall, directly connected the alleyway to an abandoned old house. At around 4:30 in the afternoon, Hiro and his teammates were warming up their bodies for the evening training. While still warming up, suddenly Yuya opened his mouth and questioned Hiro. I didn't expect that fat guy to play that well. What was his name again? Hiro, who was juggling the ball beside him, answered without stopping his legs. His name is Masao. You're right. That Masao guy. Did he play football before? Yuya continued. While still juggling the ball, Hiro replied casually. I heard from Rin that he used to play some football in elementary school. Aside from that, I don't know more about him. While speaking of Masao, he then paused all of a sudden and continued with a serious tone, except the fact that he gets bullied at school. Upon hearing the words of Hiro, Yuya, who was stretching his legs, stopped all of a sudden and abruptly turned his head towards him. He then looked at him with his enlarged pupils. He gets bullied. By whom? While holding the ball in his hands, Hiro looked at the ball while frowning his brows and replied. I heard from Rin that he gets picked on by some bullies of our class. I don't know much. He only mentioned that he gets picked on for his weight. But when I look at him, I feel like there's something more. Yuya, who was looking at Hiro with his eyes wide open, was left speechless. Both of them then remained silent for some moment. And just as Yuya was about to open his mouth, Manager Nozomi made his appearance on the field. All of you come here. I'll announce the squad for Sunday's friendly match against Chiba Middle School. Saying such, he commanded everybody to gather around him. Let's talk about it after the training. Yuya mumbled and stormed towards Manager Nozomi. Hiro too nodded his head and ran towards Manager Nozomi to join the crowd. And after everybody gathered in the field, Manager Nozomi began to announce the squad for Sunday's match against Chiba Middle School. Goalkeeper, Shunya Buzo. Center backs, Yugo Tatsuda and Haruto Suzuki. Haruto Suzuki was the opposing defender he faced previously during the match against the starting players. Long rectangular face, black pupils, muscular body, silky straight black hair, which gave others the impression of him shampooing his hair almost every day. Haruto Suzuki was the official number 3 of U15 team. Unafraid of performing rough tackles, he was a nightmare for the strikers. That guy. He nearly broke my legs in the previous match. Did he take lessons from Pepe and Ramos? Hiro mumbled while looking at Haruto. Yuya, who was standing beside him, heard his whisper, and after hearing his words, he whispered back, consider yourself lucky and be careful of him. He sprained my ankles once in training already. While both of them were gossiping among themselves, Manager Nozomi continued with his announcement. Left back, Soma Oda. Square-shaped face with brown pupils and somewhat brown hair. Soma Oda stepped in front upon hearing his name. Dude, seriously, I've been thinking about it since our first game, but how old is he? Hiro murmured while looking at Soma Oda's appearance. Since he looked quite old compared to other players, Hiro couldn't help but ask about his age. He's 15. Yuya replied casually. 15. Hiro abruptly turned his head towards Yuya. He couldn't believe that the guy in front of him was only 15 years old. Since he looked much older compared to his age, Hiro couldn't stop himself from staring at him, perplexingly. Right back, Shunta Tanaka. Upon hearing his name, Shunta's face brightened and his eyes widened. He was both excited and shocked to hear his name called out for the starting 11. Sounding all surprised, Shun spoke meekly while pointing his finger towards himself. I got selected. Can you believe it? Yuya and Hiro, who were standing beside him, gave him a smile and congratulated him. Congratulations, Shunta. Your efforts were recognized. With his head in the clouds, he totally forgot that he had to step in front. Shunta, come forward. Noticing him standing still while looking at Hiro and Yuya, Manager Nozomi yelled, sounding somewhat agitated. Hiro, who was standing beside him, gave him a slight push as well. Having been pushed from the behind, he tumbled forward. He then, while balancing himself, apologized to Manager Nozomi for his absent-mindedness. Sorry, sir. I was just excited to hear my name. It won't happen again, sir. Chapter 93 Pass, Turn, Receive, Shoot. It's good that you realize your mistake, but still don't disrupt the announcement. Saying such, Manager Nozomi continued with his announcement. Midfielders, Hidetaka Mai, Hirado Hayakukai, and Takahashi Hiro. Upon having their names called, the three of them took a step forward and joined the clique of players who were selected for the starting 11. Since most of the times, the U15 team played with only one attacking midfielder, other players couldn't help but wonder why Manager Nozomi selected two players who played in the same position that time around. Why did he pick two attacking midfielders? The players thought after hearing the name of Hiro and Hirado. Even though they weren't against Manager Nozomi's decision, they still couldn't comprehend the reason behind selecting two players who played in the same position. At most they had expected manager Nozomi to pick Hiro over Hirado. Thus, manager Nozomi's announcement left all of them completely baffled. Forwards, Seiya Baba, Sho Inagaki, and Yuya Asano. Sho Inagaki was the same center forward whom he played against in the match between the starters and reserves. Body which was neither shredded nor fat, his muscles weren't much flashy. Black pupils, small nose and short dark black hair, which was firmly cut in a buzz cut. His facial features were well defined. That's all for the starting 11. Also Takakazu Yokotaro, Kota Yui, Ryu Matucci, Daichi Sugimoto, and Kosuke Uchida will be the substitutes for the match against Chiba. As manager Nozomi finished making the announcement, he retracted his step. Coach Fuji then took up the stage and added few more words. Although these players are selected for the Sunday's friendly match, it doesn't mean that the spot is guaranteed. Since we still have 3 more days left for the match, the list could change any time. So don't slack and all of you give your best. After that announcement, the evening training started in full swing. And as the players started to scatter around, Takakazu walked towards manager Nozomi without being noticed. Sir, thank you for accepting my request. Sounding grateful, Takakazu thanked manager Nozomi while bowing his head slightly. No need to thank me. Just focus on your recovery. Saying such, manager Nozomi walked away, leaving him alone. Takakazu, who played as a starting center back for the opposing team previously, had slightly hurt his ankle during the match. Hence, he had asked manager Nozomi to not play him in Sunday's match. However, manager Nozomi couldn't leave him completely out of the squad, and thus, instead he placed him in the reserves. The coaches then began to assemble the players for the first training drill. For the first training drill, they were going to perform pass, turn, receive, shoot. For that drill, 4 players were chosen. 3 players positioned in a triangular shape, with the 4th player at the middle of the triangle who'd act as the pass maker. They would then coordinate with each other and perform multiple fast-paced passes, and finally the player in the middle would shoot the ball towards the post. That drill could help the player to develop their vision, improve their passing and awareness, and most importantly, it would help them to coordinate better. Hirado, Hiro, Sho, and Yuya stepped forward. Calling out their names, Coach Fuji asked them to step forward. And as they stepped forward, he began to position Hirado, Sho, and Yuya at certain distance away from each other in a shape of triangle. He then positioned Hiro at the center of the triangle and gave Hirado and Yuya 1 ball each. That meant that they were going to perform the drill with 2 balls. With Shun in the goalpost, after placing them all in their respective position, Coach Fuji blew his whistle. Beep. Hirado then passed the ball to Hiro, who was at the center of the triangle. At the same time, Yuya too passed the ball in his feet to Sho. After receiving the ball from Hirado, Hiro released the ball to Yuya and quickly turned around to face Sho. Sho then released the ball to Hiro. At the same time, Yuya released the ball to Hirado. After receiving the ball from Sho, Hiro then passed the ball back to Sho without trapping and quickly turned around towards Hirado to receive another pass. The ball which Sho received from Hiro, he then passed the ball to Yuya. At the same time, Hirado released the ball to Hiro as well. Hiro then shot the ball he received from Hirado towards the post and quickly turned towards Yuya to receive the final pass of the drill. And then he once again shot the ball he received from Yuya towards the post. They continued to repeat the same pattern while switching the player in the middle for several rounds. Although the training looked kinda complicated, it wasn't. In fact, the pattern was quite simple. However, the only thing that was difficult was the movement one would require to pull up those moves. One needed to be extremely agile and sharp to follow the pathway of both the balls. Hiro executed the drill flawlessly without any fail for 2 rounds. However, the others couldn't execute the drill without any mistakes in both the rounds. Not because they couldn't memorize the pattern and follow the ball. They couldn't perform the drill because of the speed of the passes. The passes were simply too fast. After that drill, the coaches then made them perform few other training drills. And finally, they ended the training with a rondo. And by the time they completed their evening training, the sun had already settled down, with stars and the luminescent crescent moon becoming visible in the sky mixed with blue and black hues. The ambience around the ground had gotten chilly. The fast-paced training had completely exhausted the players. However, it wasn't anything out of ordinary. Players lying on the field panting heavily was an everyday sight at the field. While everybody were lying on the field, there was still one player who was juggling the ball. And that player was Hiro. Although he too was exhausted by the training, he hadn't had enough yet. On the contrary, he was enjoying the tiring drills. Chapter 94 Friendly Match I. November 4th, 2021. Seated inside a bus, Hiro and his teammates were on their way to Chiba Middle School, which was located about 25 kilometers south to their hostel. With manager Nozomi and coach Fuji seated in the front seat beside the driver, the rest of the players were seated in the passenger seats. Most of the players in the bus were pretty relaxed. However, there were also few players, mostly the ones who got promoted from the reserve team, whose face looked pale and pretty tensed. With their brows frowning, some of them were biting their nails, while some of them were joining their hands, praying to God. Among them one was Shunta, who was seated right next to Yuya at the 3rd row. Coming from a Buddhist family, he was a follower of Buddha. Clenching his bag tightly with both his hands and closing his eyes, he was intensely praying to the Buddha to bless him and help him in the match. And one could tell just by looking at him that he was extremely anxious about the match which was going to take place in a moment. Yuya, who was seated right next to him, wasn't paying any attention to Shunta, and he looked completely fine. There wasn't even a speck of worry in his face. And Hiro, who was seated right behind them alongside Shun, looked pretty excited about the match. With his lips curling, Hiro wasn't able to stop himself from smiling while thinking about the match. Someone seems pretty excited about the match. Yuya, who was seated in front of him, chuckled while turning his head behind. While maintaining the smile on his face, Hiro replied, "Huh? Yeah. I'm just excited to test my skills against another team after so long. And I'm also excited to play some competitive matches." Since it had been a long time since he last used his skills, he was pretty excited to use those skills once again. Also, he still had an unused golden ticket which he had acquired after completing the quest, Impress the Kinzaki brothers from 2 years ago. Since there wasn't any need for him to use that ticket right away, he had been saving that ticket for his time at the youth club. Hearing his cheerful voice, Shun, who was seated right next to him, joined in on the conversation. He then spoke, sounding somewhat sarcastic. "I guess those training matches and lunch break matches weren't competitive enough for our star player." "It's not like that," Hiro mumbled and tried to deny Shun's claims. I know. Hiro can only be satiated by competitive matches, and those matches were not competitive enough for him." Shun continued to tease him. "Huh, yeah." While nodding his head, Ya burst out into laughter as well. While the three of them were cheerfully gossiping with each other, suddenly, all of a sudden, Yuya stopped laughing. With a quizzical look on his face as if he remembered something, Yuya then spoke. Speaking of lunch break matches, what happened to that Masao guy? I didn't see him after that time when he played with us." And as the topic of Masao was brought, the radiance and the smile on the face of Hiro quickly faded away. Upon witnessing Hiro's face, Shun, who was smiling beside him, quickly dropped his smile and looked at him seriously. Hiro then frowned his brows and replied in a serious tone, "He didn't come to school after that day. The teacher simply told us that he was sick. However, when the teacher was telling us about the reason Masao couldn't attend the school, I couldn't stop myself from suspecting Masato and his gangs. And just as I looked back, while telling them about Masao, Hiro paused all of a sudden. His face darkened as he lowered his gaze. Then what?" Yuya and Shun yelled while rising from their seats. Their loud voice reverberated all over the bus, and it was heard by everyone in the bus. Hearing their voice, the other players in the bus all turned their attention towards them. Perplexingly staring at them, they couldn't help but wonder why they looked so worked up. "Shun, Yuya, what are guys doing? Sit down," Manager Nozomi yelled while glaring at them. "Sorry, sir." Both of them then apologized and sat down. "Then what, Hiro?" They then whispered, meekly asking Hiro to finish his sentence. "I saw Masato and his sidekicks laughing," Hiro replied meekly. Although they were shocked to hear about the deeds of Masato and his gangs, they didn't react like how they reacted a moment ago. In fact, they didn't say anything at all for some moments. As if they were lost in some kind of deep thinking, they began to ponder something. And suddenly the atmosphere around them got ghastly silent. Finally, after a moment of thinking, Ya broke the silence by opening his mouth. Something must have happened to Masao, and they must be behind Masao's absence. Ya mumbled meekly while demonstrating a serious expression on his face. "I agree." Shun nodded his head in agreement. "But what could have happened?" Hiro questioned with a quizzical look on his face. "Maybe they hit him," Shun mumbled. They then began to think of different scenarios. However, they couldn't come to a conclusion, since none of them actually knew much about Masao. Finally, after a while, the bus stopped in front of the Chiba Middle School. And as the bus stopped, the three of them decided to stop talking about Masao for the time being. "Okay, everyone, let's go." Saying such, Manager Nozomi and Coach Fuji hopped out of the bus with their bags. All of the players followed suit and started to exit the bus one after the other. And as all of them exited the bus, Manager Nozomi began to call the names of the players. Just as Manager Nozomi finished calling the name of the players, an old man with silvery gray hair with a dad bod dressed in a comfortable tracksuit walked out of the entrance of the school ahead and approached Manager Nozomi. "You finally made it, Nozomi." The man spoke in a friendly manner while extending his hand towards Manager Nozomi. Chapter 95 Friendly Match 2. As Manager Nozomi faced that fat old man in front, his face lit up and a smile formed on his face. Manager Nozomi then extended his hand to shake the hand of the old man in front and spoke in a cheerful voice. Glad to see you, Tanaka." The fat old man with silvery white hair in front was the head coach of the Chiba Middle School. "Glad to see you too, Nozomi." The coach of Chiba Middle School greeted him back with a smile on his face. They then began to cheerfully exchange greetings with each other. If one were to look at those two gossiping with such big smiles on their faces, they would probably think that those two were quite close to each other in a good way. However, the reality was actually very different. Both those old men in front were forcing a smile on their faces in reality. "I heard that the club didn't held any trial this year. So I guess you're back with the same squad from previous year. I feel so sorry for you, Nozomi." Tanaka mumbled while revealing a pretentious, sad expression on his face. "But don't worry, Nozomi, we won't be hard on you." Tanaka continued with a wry smile on his face. And as he forced a smile on his face, the wrinkles on his face became even more vivid. Hearing such words coming out from the mouth of Coach Tanaka, Nozomi's mouth twitched a little and his face tightened. And as his face tightened, his nerves across his forehead got exposed all of a sudden. Still, he maintained the smile on his face and kept his cool. However, the smile on his face still couldn't completely hide his real emotions. It was clear that he was pissed by Coach Tanaka's remarks. "We still have promoted some of our academy players, so our squad is not entirely made up of the same players from before," Nozomi replied while maintaining his smile and keeping his cool. He still wasn't willing to disclose the addition of Hiro to him, and thus he didn't mention anything about Hiro at all. "Good for you, Nozomi. I just hope that your team won't concede 3 this time like before." Ha ha ha. Mumbling such, Tanaka laughed and released Nozomi's hand. He then began to walk towards the entrance of the school without hearing his reply. You, unable to reply anything, Nozomi gnashed his teeth while looking at the back of Coach Tanaka. Follow me. I'll guide you to the pitch. Tanaka spoke while walking towards the school. Upon witnessing the actions of those two coaches in front, Hiro couldn't help but wonder if something was going on between them. Do they have some kind of beef with each other? Hiro asked while looking at the side of manager Nozomi, who was fuming at that moment. Yeah, they're kinda like rivals since their younger days. Also, we lost 3-1 previously when we faced them in Takamoto Cup. So I can guess Coach Tanaka must have provoked him by mentioning about that loss. Shun replied with a straight face. Everyone let's go. Manager Nozomi yelled and began to tail Coach Tanaka. Following the command of Manager Nozomi, all of them followed his lead and entered the school. The players of Chiba Middle School were already on the field, warming up for the game against Kawasaki Frontale, Club's U15 youth team. And even though the players of Chiba Middle School were warming up in the field in front, the first thing that he noticed as he reached the pitch was the size of the pitch. The pitch's size is quite similar to ours. Hiro mumbled without thinking, while staring at the pitch of Chiba Middle School. PFT hahaha, that's our hero. He's more concerned about the pitch than the opposing players. Ya laughed after hearing his remarks. Alright, I nearly forgot about them. Even though the coach had mentioned about them before, I couldn't remember all of them. Hiro mumbled while scratching his scalp. Noticing his quizzical face, Shun offered to help him. It's alright. I'll tell you about them. Shun then began to reintroduce him about the players of Chiba Middle School. And while Shun was telling him about the opposing players, Manager Nozomi called them. Shun, Hiro, what are you doing over there? Go and change your clothes. Yes, sir. Replying such, both of them hurriedly ran towards the changing room. And as all of them came back after changing into their jerseys, Manager Nozomi commanded them to warm up for about 10 minutes. Go and warm up for a while. The game will start after 10 minutes. Hearing his commands, all of them then started to loosen up their stiff bodies. Seems like the opposing team has brought some new players. One of the player of Chiba Middle School commented while looking at the side of Hiro and few other previously reserved players. Look, Chris, there's a guy who looks as good as you. A guy with long hair and small face spoke while pointing at Hiro. Silky smooth blonde hair and turquoise blue pupils with sharp nose and a chiseled jaw. Chris Phillips' facial features were well defined. With a handsome manly appearance, he was a tall blonde guy of height 5 feet 9 inches. Compared to the other players in the field, he was a titan. Despite being a British, he had been temporarily studying and living in Japan since 2016 because of his father's job. Hearing such words, Chris turned his attention towards Hiro. He then began to scan Hiro's appearance. And as he completed his observations, he spoke. He's a decently good-looking guy, but he still won't hold a candle against me. You need to get your eyes checked, Kuroda. Sigh. Well, I wonder if there's even anyone whom you consider better looking than you. Heaving a sigh, Kuroda sulked and replied meekly. What are you guys talking about there? The coach is calling us to gather. Another guy with tan skin and brown eyes interrupted them while they were conversing with each other. And as all of them gathered, Coach Tanaka began to instruct every player their roles. Kuroda, every time you get the ball at the flank of the final third, supply a high ball inside the penalty box. Do you understand? Hearing Coach Tanaka's instructions, Kuroda nodded his head. And Chris, you, just do your job as usual. Make use of your height and head the ball inside the net. You can do that, right? Yes, sir. Chris nodded his head. Chapter 96 Friendly Match 3. While both the managers were busy discussing their strategy with their players, an anonymous guy probably in his early 20s showed up, dressed in a comfortable green tracksuit. He then walked towards Coach Tanaka while wearing a smile on his face and began to converse with him while exchanging a friendly handshake. After that, he came towards their side and approached Manager Nozomi. Ryu, you're here. Manager Nozomi spoke cheerfully while extending his hand towards him. The guy in the green tracksuit then grabbed his hand and spoke in an apologetic tone. Sorry I was late. Just as I was about to leave, something came up. With a smile on his face, Nozomi shrugged his shoulder and replied, it's alright. Guys, this guy here will be refereeing your match today. Although he's a graduate of Chiba Middle School, he himself used to be a very skilled player. But right now he's studying in Sakura University, studying sports science. So all of you thank Brother Ryu for the trouble he took for you today. Manager Nozomi introduced Ryu to his players and asked them to greet him. Thank you, Brother Ryu, for your hard work. We'll be under your care. Saying such, all of them bowed their head and greeted the guy who was going to referee the match. Due to the personal connection he had with the coaches of both the team, Ryu was hired by both the coaches to act as a referee for their friendly game that day. Thank you, everyone. I'll be under your care as well. Saying such, Ryu greeted them back with a smile on his face. And after greeting both the teams, he headed towards the center of the field. He then took out a whistle from the left pocket of his tracksuit and blew it loudly. Beep. Hearing the shrill sound of the whistle, everybody turned their attention towards the guy in the middle of the pitch. Okay, guys, let's go and show them what we got. Before sending them off, Manager Nozomi encouraged them to give their best. Yeah, let's go, guys. Shun, who was the captain of the team, yelled enthusiastically as he took the lead. Yeah. All of them yelled and walked towards the center of the field, queued up behind Shun. And as both the team lined up at the field, Ryu called out the captain of both the teams to perform a coin toss. From their side, Shun stepped forward, and from the opponent's side, their keeper, who was half a head taller than Shun, stepped forward. Head or tails? Ryu asked while taking out a coin from his pocket. You can pick first, Satoru. Shun spoke while looking at the opposing goalkeeper. Thank you. The opposing goalkeeper nodded his head. Tails then. Then I'll be taking the head. Shun replied meekly. Well, you don't have any choice. Ha ha ha. Ryu laughed and teased Shun as he flipped the coin high above his head. The coin continued to levitate for a while, and as the coin dropped on the ground, Ryu lowered his head to check the outcome of the coin toss. Tails, Ryu spoke while picking the coin. Chiba Middle School won the coin toss, and thus they decided to select the goalpost. After selecting the goalpost, both the teams lined up in a queue to exchange a friendly handshake before assuming their respective positions. One after other, Hiro shook hands with the opposing players. Since it was only a protocol, he wasn't in the mood to chat with the opposing players. Thus, he had been performing quick handshakes without paying much attention to their appearances. However, as he was moving forward while performing quick handshakes, suddenly he got pulled slightly by one of the opposing player while trying to move forward. Who? He blurted out as he turned towards the player who pulled him. Blonde hair, turquoise ocean pupils, Chris Phillips. He was the titan of Chiba Middle School. Sorry for exerting some force. I didn't know that you were so fragile. Chris spoke while smiling. From the tone of his speech and the expression he was flaunting on his face, it was clear that Chris was taunting him. However, Hiro showed no change in his facial expressions and kept his cool. Upon seeing no changes in his facial expression, Chris dropped his smile and clicked his tongue. "Tis you're no fun." Saying such, he released his hand. But just as Hiro was about to move forward, he spoke again. "What position do you play?" Even though he wasn't being arrogant, Hiro wasn't interested in telling him either, and as such, while maintaining his stoic face, he replied, "You'll know once the game starts." Saying such, he kept on walking forward without paying any attention to him. He wasn't even slightly bothered by Chris's actions. However, the same couldn't be said to Chris. With his pupils enlarged and face tightened, he was cussing Hiro. "That prick. Who does he think he is to act such haughtily? I just hope that you're the defender. Just you wait and see how I'll humble you. Why are you getting annoyed now? Wasn't it you who tried to provoke him?" Kuroda thought while looking at Chris, who was fuming. And as everybody finished exchanging handshakes, all of the players assumed their position. Chiba Middle School was going to play in a 4-2-3-1 formation with 2 defensive midfielder and Chris as their sole poacher. Kawasaki Frontale's U15 team was going to play in a 4-1-2-3 formation with Hidetaka playing as a center midfielder. They had no defensive midfielder. However, manager Nozomi had instructed Hidetaka to cover up the role of defensive midfielder as well, and the center backs to move forward to cover up the spaces left at the defensive midfield. With the sun shining brightly above the players' heads, Sho was preparing to pass the ball while waiting for referee's whistle. Ryu, who was standing right at the half line, was looking at his watch to commence the match. And as the minute hand reached 12, at exactly 1 p.m., Ryu blew his whistle to commence the match. Beep. Chapter 97 Friendly Match 4. Hearing the whistle of the referee, Sho, who was standing close to the ball, passed the ball back towards Hiro to start the match. "You're lucky that you're not a defender." Mumbling such under his breath, Chris began to press towards Hiro to snatch the ball away from him. Despite noticing Chris charging towards him, Hiro wasn't even a bit intimidated by his size. On the contrary, he calmly dribbled the ball towards him as if he was blatantly challenging him to a duel. Since Chris had already considered Hiro an arrogant player because of Hiro's earlier behavior towards him, Hiro's actions agitated him even further. And thus he took Hiro's actions as a provocation. Provoked by Hiro's actions, he sprinted even faster with all his strength. "Good," manager Nozomi mumbled under his breath while looking at the agitated face of Chris. Hiro still continued to dribble the ball calmly towards him, and as he got closer to him, he simply passed the ball to Hirado, who was positioned right beside him. Noticing the pass, Chris quickly changed his target to Hirado. He then, without pausing, charged towards Hirado. Hirado, too, didn't keep the ball long with him and passed the ball to Hidetaka, who was right behind him. Still, Chris's relentless pursuit didn't come to an end, and he continued his pressing like a madman. With swift and precise passes, for a while Hiro's teammates kept on passing the ball between themselves, and Chris and his teammates continued to chase after the ball. As if they were playing the game of cat and mouse, the passing and the chasing continued. This team looks completely different than before. And what's with that new number 10? He's literally everywhere. Coach Tanaka commented with an anxious look on his face, while keeping his eyes fixated at Hiro. Just like an orchestrator guiding the musicians with his baton, Hiro was connecting and guiding his teammates to create a beautiful symphony with the ball. After a while of chasing, Chris, who had been chasing after the ball relentlessly, began to show signs of exhaustion. And thus, just within 25 minutes of the game, by pressing relentlessly, he completely exhausted himself. The Mad Dog has been subjugated. Now it's time for us to score some goals. Manager Nozomi, who was standing at the sidelines, smirked and mumbled to himself with a satiated look on his face, while looking at the sight of Chris completely worn down. Since Chris was the star player of Chiba Middle School, who had scored 3 goals against them previously and was extremely lethal in offense with his reach and pace, Manager Nozomi, while taking Chris's personality into consideration, had advised his players to keep on passing the ball between themselves until they tire out Chris. Following the coach's strategy, Hiro and his teammates executed the strategy perfectly without any fail. Thus, for that entire 25 minutes, all they did was pass the ball between themselves. Occasionally, the opposing team did manage to steal the ball. However, they couldn't retain the position of the ball for long. At the 26th minute of the game, noticing Yuya making his run from the left flank, Hiro lofted the ball towards Yuya from the middle third of the pitch. The opposing players who were focused on the ball began to chase after the ball. And as soon as Hiro released the ball towards Yuya, Hiro began to make his run towards the opposing goalpost. Making use of his explosive pace, he sprinted as fast as he could. Noticing Hiro's run, Coach Tanaka from the sidelines yelled at the top of his lungs, "Watch out for the number 10. However, because of the intensity of the play, no player from his team heard his screams. And thus they continued to press after the ball and safeguard their defensive third, which was the most logical thing for them to do at that moment. The opposing right back who was marking Yuya was trying to snatch the ball away from Yuya by pressing him continuously. Even though Yuya was somehow holding the ball despite those continuous pressing from the opposing right back, he was starting to feel uncomfortable. Since the opposing center back were right behind the right back, Yuya was having trouble to cut inside, and thus he was forced to move along the flank. While almost every opposing player and offensive players of Kawasaki Frontale U15 team were gathered inside the penalty box, anticipating a cross from Yuya, Hiro was still outside the box, totally unmarked. Noticing Hiro making his run towards the penalty box, totally unmarked, Yuya lofted the ball towards Hiro. However, because of the pressing from the opposing defender, Yuya couldn't hit the ball with perfect accuracy. He hit the ball a little too hard. While trying to reach the ball, Hiro jumped as high as he could. However, the ball still flew above his head and avoided him. And just when the opposing team was heaving a sigh of relief, another player who had noticed Hiro's run and was also making his own run, although not as fast Hiro, made his appearance behind him and trapped the ball in his chest. Lanky body, dark hair, he was the guy with number 6 on his back. And that guy was none other than Hidetaka. Noticing Hidetaka, the two opposing defensive midfielder came rushing towards him to stop him from making a shot. And as Hidetaka was stretching his legs to shoot the ball, the opposing defensive midfielder threw their body towards him. However, Hidetaka tapped the ball lightly and faked his shot. The opposing defensive midfielders couldn't stop their tackles and flew past him. Hidetaka then passed the ball towards Hiro, who was making his run inside the box. And as the ball came rolling towards him, Hiro shot the ball without any mistake. The ball flew straight towards the goalpost. The opposing goalkeeper, whose vision was obstructed by the players in front, couldn't react to the ball and thus ended up conceding the goal from the first shot of the game. Golo Alol. The players and managers of Kawasaki Frontale U15 team yelled at the same time. Manager Nozomi's happiness knew no bound as he jumped and threw an air punch. That goal was simply a piece of art. Hiro, after scoring the goal, ran towards Yuya, and so did other players. All of them started to run towards Hiro to celebrate the goal. Yuya, who had nearly messed up a perfect build-up, was the one with the widest smile. He was simply overjoyed by Hiro's goal. 98 friendly match v. After conceding a goal at 27th minute of the game continued with the kickoff of Chiba Middle School. The titan of Chiba Middle School, who was covered in sweat, was panting heavily while standing in front of the ball for the kickoff. His brows knotted and his body slightly limped. He was fuming while standing in front of the ball, waiting for the referee's whistle. Beep. And as Chris heard referee's whistle, he then passed the ball back to his teammate to start the match. And the match continued normally after that 27th minute goal from Hiro. Although Chris looked extremely tired, he hadn't admitted defeat yet. And his pride of being Chiba Middle School star player didn't allow him to slow down even after emptying his gas tank. Thus, he continued to run like he had another extra pair of lung within him. Sho, Yuya and Seiya all pressed forward for the ball. Hiro and Hirado covered as much of the midfield as they could, while the defensive midfielder and defenders of the Chiba Middle School tried to attract the opposing players by passing the ball in their defensive half. Their forwards moved upfield without looking back, leaving their midfield area completely vacant. From their movements, it was clear that they had given up on controlling the ball at the midfield, and they were opting for playing long balls instead. Since they had a titan of center forward, they could swiftly switch their gameplay from passing to long balls without any delay. At 30th minute of the match, one of their defensive midfielder who had the hold of the ball kicked the ball towards Kuroda, who was making his run from the right flank towards the opponent's defensive third. Kuroda sprinted as fast as he could to take the hold of the ball before it went out of bounds. However, despite his speed, he couldn't reach the ball before Shunta, who also happened to be positioned at the right flank since he was a right back. Upon reaching the ball before Kuroda, noticing the presence of Kuroda behind him, Shunta cleared the ball away and the ball went out of bounds. And after the ball went out of bounds, a throw-in was awarded to Chiba Middle School. For the throw-in, while their offensive players gathered inside the penalty box, one of their defensive midfielder named Yamato ran towards the touchline to take the throw-in. Gauging by the positioning of their offensive players, it was clear that they were going to take a long throw. Watch out for their players. Shun shouted and guided his teammates to cover up the vacant spaces. Haruto, watch out for Chris. Don't let him jump. Retracting few steps back while holding the ball above his head with both his hands, Yamato was preparing himself to perform a long throw. Beep. And as the referee blew his whistle, Yamato tightened his muscles while sprinting towards the touchline. Yamato then launched the ball inside the penalty box with as much force as he can. The ball flew high above, towards the penalty box, and one could tell just by looking at the ball that the ball was meant for Chris. Except Chris, Shun was the only other player who could reach that high ball, since he was a goalkeeper and he could use his hands. Sensing a threat, Shun ran forward to punch the ball. At the same time, Haruto, as instructed by Shun, delayed Chris's jump by pressing his body against him. WTF, Chris cussed inside his mind while struggling to jump. Shun then punched the ball away. The ball flew outside the penalty box towards Hiro. Without any delay, Hiro sent the ball towards Seiya and started to run. Fall back. Yelling such, Yamato began to chase Seiya, who was charging the ball forward. After punching that ball away from his goalpost, his team had a chance to score another goal from that counterattack. Despite his arrogant nature, Seiya was a really agile player. He was only second to Hiro and Shunta in the team. Making use of his pace, Seiya, after receiving the ball at the midfield, began to dribble the ball towards the opposing goalpost. To stop him from dribbling the ball forward, Niji, the other defensive midfielder of Chiba Middle School who hadn't moved up the field, charged towards him. Noticing the opposing defensive midfielder, Seiya began to look for his teammates. Sho was being marked by opposing defenders, and so was Yuya. After noticing both the forwards marked, he took a peek behind him. Hiro was right behind him to support him. Why does it have to be him? Seiya thought to himself after noticing Hiro behind him. Noticing Seiya's gaze, Hiro shouted, "Pass." But just as Seiya locked eyes with Hiro, he quickly turned his head forward and ignored his calls. Seiya then tried to dribble the ball all by himself instead of passing the ball to Hiro, who was right behind him totally unmarked. With some body feints, Seiya tried to shook off his mark. However, while trying to snatch the ball, Niji accidentally hit Seiya's leg. Upon getting hit at his leg, due to his momentum, Seiya went flying in front. And as he crashed against the ground, he grabbed his legs and began to pant in pain. Arg. Ard. Beep. Foul. The referee spoke while pointing at the place where Seiya was lying down holding his leg while making painful expression. How was that foul? Yeah. He is acting, ref. Niji only touched him. Players of Chiba Middle School surrounded Ryu and began to complain and question his judgment. It's a foul. And if anybody isn't satisfied with my decision, then they're free to leave. Saying such, Ryu put his hand inside his pocket, probably to take out his cards. Noticing Ryu putting his hands inside his pocket, their captain Satoru and Kuroda began to console their teammates. They then apologized to the referee for their misconduct. Sorry, ref. Our players were being immature. Hearing the apology from their captain, Ryu let go of the card. 99 End of friendly match. For Niji's foul against Seiya, the referee awarded their team a free kick. The spot at where they were awarded the free kick was quite far from the goalpost. In fact, the free kick spot was near the center circle. It's okay, guys. It's not a big deal. So let's not make a fuss about the foul. Plus, look at the spot where they're awarded the free kick. It's like more than 40 yards away from our goalpost. And to score a goal from that spot, they'd probably need Roberto Carlos. And do any of you see Roberto Carlos in that team? Well, I don't see any. So fret not, guys. Saying such, Satoru tried to encourage his teammates and raise their morale. Yeah, he's right, guys. Let's not get worked up over a single foul. Kuroda added while clapping his hands. Yeah. Chris, who had been sulking because of the earlier goal and Haruto's challenge, parroted enthusiastically after listening to the motivating words of Satoru. While the players of Chiba Middle School were talking such, looking all motivated, the scene at the other side was quite different. Seiya was arguing with other players, fighting over the free kick. It was me who won the free kick, so it should be me who should take the free kick. Seiya exasperated while holding the ball. Yuya and the other tried to snatch the ball away from him, but he wasn't willing to listen to them. He was adamant on being the free kick taker. Look, the coach has already decided the set piece taker before the game, so it's better you give up the ball. Yuya intoned while trying to snatch the ball away from him. Hirato and some other players were playing the role of the spectators. Without taking anyone's side, they were simply observing Seiya and others fighting over the free kick. Hiro, who was the appointed set-piece taker, was keeping his mouth shut and silently observing Seiya getting worked up over a free kick. What are those idiots doing? I had already announced the set-piece taker before match. So why are they fighting over set-piece at this moment? Manager Nozomi exasperated while putting his hands atop his head. He was already upset by Seiya's action earlier, when he decided to ignore Hiro and dribble the ball all by himself. But looking at his actions at that moment, he was literally on the verge of erupting. Noticing them fighting over the set piece, while wasting time, Ryu shouted furiously. Team Kawasaki, what are you doing? Don't hog onto the ball for long. I'll charge you all with time wasting and give you yellow cards. Listening to the furious roar of the referee, Shun, who was the captain of the team, ran towards them to control the situation. Seiya, just give up. Look, the coach is glaring at you, and I'm sure you know the meaning behind that gaze of his. Shun spoke while pointing towards Manager Nozomi, reminding him of the consequences he'd have to face later. With his eyes wide open, Manager Nozomi was staring at Seiya coldly from outside the pitch. He looked really pissed. Although they couldn't see his face properly from that distance, Seiya could still feel Coach Nozomi's penetrating gazes on him. TCH, fine. Take it. Clicking his tongue, Seiya finally let go of the ball, disappointed. Yuya then picked up the ball and handed it to Hiro, who was standing right behind him with a dumbfounded look on his face. And as he was about to leave, Yuya spoke. Show them what you can do, Hiro. Hiro nodded his head and took the ball from him. And as he placed the ball at the spot marked by the referee, Hiro retracted few steps behind. After retracting about 7 steps, he paused and let out a deep breath. He then looked at the ball and post in front. A wall of 5 tall players from Chiba Middle School stood in front of him and the post. Except 2 defenders, all his teammates were gathered at the opponent's penalty box. System activate Roberto Carlos's free kick, he spoke to himself. Roberto Carlos's free kick activated. Beep. And as Ryu blew his whistle, Hiro ran towards the ball. He then hit the ball with inside of his right foot. The wall of players jumped up to block the ball. However, the ball flew just above their head and headed straight towards the goalpost. What the? Chris cussed while turning his head behind towards the goalpost. Coach Tanaka, with his mouth agape and pupils enlarged, looked at the ball totally shocked. Due to the spin on the ball curved along the way. Even Satoru wasn't prepared for that free kick. At most he had expected Hiro to pass the ball to his teammates at the penalty box. But Hiro's powerful free kick caught him totally off guard. Even so, he tried to stop the ball from finding its way inside the net. Satoru then dived towards the direction of the ball. But still he couldn't manage to land a touch on the ball. The ball effortlessly found its way inside the net. Neither the opposing teammates nor his own teammates could believe their eyes. Even after the ball touched the net, nobody made any sound for a while. Finally, after a few seconds, his teammates burst in jeers. Gulo all. The players of Kawasaki Frontale U15 team yelled ecstatically. Jumping and running, they began to celebrate Hiro's unbelievable goal. Coach Tanaka's face turned pale all of a sudden after witnessing that unbelievable goal of Hiro. What just happened? He mumbled as he turned his head towards Coach Nozomi. And as he turned his gaze towards Coach Nozomi in shock, he found Coach Nozomi looking at him with a sly smile on his face. Witnessing Manager Nozomi's sly smile, Tanaka's face tightened. He then gnashed his teeth and squeezed out some word from his mouth. That sly old fox. After scoring a goal at the 31st minute of the match, Hiro's team played even more aggressively at the second half after making few substitutions and scored for more goals in the second half. Seiya was substituted because of his earlier misconduct and disobedience. Thus, the game ended with Hiro's team victory with an overwhelming score of 6-0. At that 6-0 victory over Chiba Middle School, Hiro scored 4 goals and assisted a goal to Yugo. Hirado recorded 2 assists himself, 1 for Hiro and 1 for Sho. And Hidetaka and Yuya recorded an assist each for themselves as well. And thus the game finally came to an end. While Coach Tanaka was gritting his teeth and grieving his team's loss, Manager Nozomi was flying over the cloud after securing such an overwhelming victory over the team to whom they conceded 3 goals previously. 100 Coaches discussion. After the end of the match, Coach Tanaka approached Manager Nozomi with rather irritated look on his face to congratulate Manager Nozomi for his team's victory over his own. Congratulations, Nozomi. Coach Tanaka congratulated Nozomi while gritting his teeth. Thank you, Tanaka. Like you said, my team didn't concede 3 goals this time around. And I'm sure it's all because of your well wishes. So thank you very much, Tanaka. Manager Nozomi replied with a smile on his face. Listening to Nozomi's words, Coach Tanaka's mouth twitched a little. And even though he was on the verge of exploding, he kept his cool and replied with a pretentious smile on his face. It's all because of your players. So please don't give me the credit for your team's victory. Maintaining his pretentious smile, he then began to rummage his mind to think of some excuses to walk away. All right, I remembered that I needed to discuss something with our principal today, so I'll take my leave first. Nervously saying such, Coach Tanaka turned around and walked away in a hurry, without looking back. But it's Sunday today. Manager Nozomi mumbled dumbfoundedly. But Coach Tanaka didn't reply anything, and simply kept on walking away while pretending he didn't hear anything at all. Later in the evening of that same day, at around 4:30 p.m. Hiro and his friends were seen walking towards the stadium of Kawasaki Frontale, dressed in black and blue jersey. In front of them, a lot of people dressed in the jersey of Kawasaki Frontale Club were also gathered around the Kawasaki Todoroki Stadium, smiling and singing while carrying the banners of the club. Another batch of people who were dressed in red and blue jersey were also gathered around the Kawasaki Todoroki Stadium. The people dressed in red and blue jersey were the fans of FC Tokyo. And all those people were rushing towards the Kawasaki Todoroki Stadium to witness the match between Kawasaki Frontale Club and FC Tokyo. They were gathered there to show their support for their respective teams. Because of the friendly match which took place during daytime, the coaches had exempted all the players of U15 from evening training to give them some time to recuperate from the fatigue they suffered during the match. While some players stayed in the dorm, some went outside. And Hiro and his friends were among those players who decided to go out. Impressed by Hiro's performance during the friendly match, Manager Nozomi had gifted him a ticket for the match between Kawasaki Frontale and FC Tokyo, which was going to take place later in the evening at 5 o'clock. However, since he didn't want to alone, he requested Manager Nozomi to provide him with 3 more tickets for his friends. Manager Nozomi, who was in a very good mood, agreed to his request and provided him with 3 more tickets. Making use of the ticket provided by Manager Nozomi, Hiro decided to go and watch the match between Kawasaki Frontale Club and FC Tokyo, also popularly known as Tamagawa Classico, with his friends. Sounding all excited, Yuya, who was a die-hard fan of Kawasaki Frontale Club, spoke while walking towards the stadium. Mark my words, Leandro Domiao is going to be the man of the match for today's match. And he's going to score another goal today. The player whom Yuya was mentioning about was a player of Brazilian origin. And at that 21-22 season, he was in a phenomenal form. Scoring a record-breaking 15 goals, he was dominating the top scorer list of J1 League. Previously playing for clubs like Santos, International, Real Betis, Flamengo, and many more, he was a talented player of Brazilian origin. Yeah, he's great. But don't forget about Rio Hatate. I'm sure he's going to show us another brilliant performance today. His speed, his passing, and his work rate. It's like moi. While excitedly praising one of the player of Kawasaki Frontale, Shunta made a kissing gesture. They are both great player. But mark my words, Karo Mitoma is going to be one of the best player in the world within few years. Shun, who had been following Mitoma's progress since some years, joined Yuya and Shunta's conversation by bringing the name of Mitoma. Mitoma. He was indeed one of the impressive player in previous year, and he did earn himself a transfer to a Premier League team. But isn't he loaned to Union SG this season? Yuya intoned while recalling things about Mitoma. At the season 2021, Mitoma was honored as one of the best player in the league, and at 21-22 season, he was bought by Brighton for a measly amount of £3 million. After that, he was loaned for the entirety of 21-22 season to Union SG. After bringing the topic of Mitoma, since their beliefs contradicted with each other, they then began to argue with each other. No one willing to back down, each and every single one of them were adamant about their opinions. And because of that unwillingness to back down, the argument was stretching even further. Hiro, who was also present there, was observing them arguing with each other, without saying anything. Since he knew about the future, he didn't feel while joining in on the argument. Unable to come to a truce, Yuya then decided to ask for Hiro's opinion. Okay, then let's ask Hiro's opinion, Yuya suggested while turning his gaze towards Hiro. Let's do that. The two of them nodded their head and agreed to his suggestion. Hiro, do you think that Mitoma's going to become one of the best players in the world within few years? Yuya asked in a serious tone with his gaze fixated at Hiro. Without any sort of hesitation, Hiro replied, yes. Hearing Hiro's words, Shun's face lit up all of a sudden, and a wide smile formed on his face. He then spoke while sounding all excited. See, I told you. Yuya and Shunta, both of their face darkened as they sulked their head after hearing Hiro's opinion. Both of them mumbled while sounding somewhat disappointed. How can you be so sure of it, Hiro? Showing no changes in his facial expression, Hiro then replied with a straight face, because I can see the future. Believing his words. 1838. Hara, why do you all look so serious? It was a joke. A joke. Saying such, Hiro burst into laughter. His words left all of them speechless. Their eyes wide open and their mouth agape. They were believing his words. Hara, why do you all look so serious? It was a joke. A joke. Saying such, Hiro burst into laughter. That was a joke. Damn. But after watching you play, if you tell me that it's your second time in life, I would have even believed it. Yuya mumbled while heaving a sigh of relief. Right. The other two standing beside expressed their agreement. At an office at the same time, when Hiro and his friends were heading to Kawasaki Todoroki Stadium, Manager Nozomi and Manager Makoto were sitting opposite to each other at an office room, consisting of an immaculate table, few chairs, a whiteboard, a flower pot, and few stationaries inside the drawer of the table. The office room was neat and clean. Brother, he's too talented to play in U15, Nozomi spoke while looking at his brother. Understanding the meaning behind his brother's sentence, Manager Makoto spoke, but he's still only 12. We can't promote him. He'll turn 13 next year, brother. We need to promote him to U18 team. If we want to win the Takamoto Premier League, then we need to promote him, brother. Brother, he's too talented for his age. Nozomi tried to reason with his brother. After hearing Nozomi's response, Makoto began to ponder. Brother, we need to use his talent. We can't let him rot at U15. He's way above their level. If not for the age requirement to play at professional level, I'd have even suggested him to the senior team. Nozomi continued. However, still after hearing so much from his brother, Makoto kept on pondering. Since he couldn't make decisions carelessly, he was hesitant to decide right away. Finally, after thinking for a while, Makoto opened his mouth. But will he be alright against guys who'll be like 4, 5 years older than him? Makoto mumbled with a concerned expression on his face. He too wanted to promote Hiro to the U18 team. However, he was also afraid of injuring Hiro. I know that you're about him, brother. But we still have more than 6 months left for the league to start. So in the meantime, if we work on his physicality, then I'm sure that we can prepare him to play against those tougher and stronger than him. Nozomi intoned. Brother, he's meant for the world. I can see a world-class player in him. So instead of holding him back, we should motivate him and push him so that he can fulfill his potential. Nozomi added. After hearing Nozomi's words, Makoto rose from his seat. He then started to walk away from the table. Witnessing Makoto's unusual behavior, Nozomi exasperated. Brother, where are you going? Didn't you say that we should motivate him and help him improve? I did. But how is you walking away without saying anything's going to help him improve? Asked Nozomi, looking somewhat dumbfounded. I was going to fetch Eric's number. Since he's his agent, we need to discuss with him before we can make any decisions. Replied Makoto while towards the closet.